4 seconds left, second and goal. Here is Williams. He's got to throw it to the end zone. Clock has expired. Williams keeps the play alive. He's looking. He's got to get rid of it. Retreating, he throws. Incomplete. It's over. And the Niners have won.
That was a ball game last night. That's for sure, man. Two really high-level head coaching, offensive coordinated, offensive football teams going toe-to-toe in a game that ended 42-38 at the 2-yard line with Caleb Williams running out of room, chucking one into the end zone, and it falling incomplete. That caps the Sunday from Week 17, but there's actually a very meaningful game tonight in the NFL standings and in the playoff picture. More on that coming up. Good morning. Max is here with me. I'm here. Ben will be on with us. You'll hear my conversation with Jay Gruden on Friday about not only the Washington-Dallas Christmas Day game, but really the plan for the offseason as it relates to fixing this wretched defensive football situation. If you watched football over the weekend, man, this is the year where defense really came back. I understand that Philadelphia won a Super Bowl led by its defense last year, and that happened. There's no doubt that that happened. And the year before, Kansas City very much won a Super Bowl by playing great defense in the postseason, especially when they shut down the Ravens and the Bills on the way to their Super Bowl win. But this year, man, you saw it this weekend. It started on Saturday afternoon. How good are the Houston Texans right now because of that defense? They overcame C.J. Stroud throwing two of the biggest boneheaded picks deep in his own territory, all right, that set up basically the only points the Chargers, had in the first half, and it was only a field goal. Their kicker actually missed a kick. Cameron Dicker, the kicker, missed a kick. Their defense, we've been talking about it on this show, Max and I have for now 2 months, that it was a Super Bowl caliber defense. They haven't lost since we started to talk about them. Really, it became very clear when they beat the Bills on a Thursday night late November that Houston was for real. That was an incredible performance. Then we get to yesterday. How good is the Browns defense? I understand DK Metcalf not in that game, and that was a crusher for Pittsburgh. Not only was he not in the game, the number 2 Miles Austin wasn't in the game, and their big tight end, the 300-pounder Washington, broke his arm in the first half. But still, how much fun is it to watch a Jim Schwartz defense? It's not just Myles Garrett. They've got others, including Denzel Ward and the rookie of the year defensively, perhaps, and Carson Schwarzenegger and other players along that defense. And then you get to Seattle and what they did at Carolina. Seattle's defense right now, is it good enough to capture the 1 seed in their game Saturday night against San Francisco? This was exactly the situation last year that Sam Darnold was in with Minnesota on the road against Detroit. Final game of the year. That was a Sunday nighter last year. This will be a Saturday nighter with a chance to capture the 1 seed and home field throughout. They got a really good defense, a better defense, believe it or not, than Minnesota's was last year. Can they do it? My God, Bryce Young, who's been on a roll, they held him to 54 yards passing in total. The Carolina Panthers yesterday, who could have clinched the division, had 139 total yards of offense against that Seattle defense. And then we saw the Eagles. Good God. I mean, that is their Super Bowl defense with Jalen Carter back, and it's probably better than it was when we got to the Super Bowl last year. Their problem, of course, is they can't move the football. They had 5 total yards in the second half. Jalen Hurts didn't complete a pass in the second half. That's real. But can their defense lead the way? It's been an incredible season, an incredible resurgence of great defensive football. I mean, we've seen it this year from Seattle. We've seen it from Houston. We've seen it at times from the Rams. We've seen it at times from, obviously Houston, Philly, Cleveland. Minnesota's defense has been lights out for the last month and a half. Denver's defense outstanding. Jacksonville takes the ball away. Chicago takes the ball away, even though they can't get stops. That's their problem. But it has watch New Orleans play some defense down the stretch. I know they gave up a bunch of points to Tennessee, but Chase Young ripped the ball out of Cam Ward's hands and returned it for a touchdown. He's been on an absolute tear. That's what you have to have. We'll see. Can a San Francisco with a bad defense right now, because the pieces that are missing, can they win a Super Bowl? Can they get to a Super Bowl with that kind of defense? Is Chicago good enough? They take the ball away. There is that, but man, they have a difficult time getting off the field unless they're getting takeaways. Can they do it? Can Buffalo make a run without a really good defensive football team? It's so intriguing heading into Week 18 and then these playoffs to see whether or not we're still in this age of offense trumps defense, or if it's flipping again back to olden times when offense, as the old people will say, put people in the seats. Defense wins championships. Defense won a championship last year. There's no doubt about it. The 49ers are exceptional offensively. Wow. Watching them in their last two games against Indy, I understand Indy's been struggling a little bit defensively, and Chicago. But wow, 48 points on Monday night, and they came back with 42 on Sunday Night Football. In their last three games, they have scored 127 points in 3 games. You can do the math on that. That's over 42 points per game the 49ers have averaged in their last 3. By the way, if you're looking back, they scored in this beginning of this 6-game run when really no one was talking about them. When they got blown out by the Rams in November, everybody said, yeah, probably not. Too many injuries to overcome, especially on the defensive side of the ball. They've been without their quarterback for 7 or 8 games, whatever it was. But since then, offensively, they have been an absolute juggernaut. They just can't stop anybody. I mean, the Titans put up against the 49er defense 300-plus yards and 24 points against the 49ers. So we'll see. Real intrigue heading into Week 18 and then the postseason, in which the postseason is going to be filled with teams we haven't seen in a while. Remember, last year's number 1 overall team was the Kansas City Chiefs at 15-2, not in the playoffs. The Detroit Lions tied with Kansas City, best record in the league at 15-2, not in the playoffs. Next best record, tied for the next best record, Minnesota Vikings at 14-3, not in the playoffs. Then it was the Eagles at 14-3. They are in the playoffs, but then it was Washington at 12-5 in the NFC, not in the postseason. We're going to end up potentially with a team winning a division with a losing record this year. The Buccaneers can accomplish that if they beat Carolina on Saturday afternoon. However, there is a wrinkle to the NFC South. I didn't know this last week, but it kind of emerged over the weekend. Atlanta actually can get Carolina in to the postseason as an NFC South champion if Atlanta wins out over the Rams tonight and New Orleans next weekend. Now, they're a big underdog tonight against the Rams, but the Rams now are no longer in the hunt for the 1 seed. They are out of the 1 seed conversation. It will be either Seattle or San Francisco as the 1 seed on Saturday night. But if Atlanta were to win out to finish 8-9, the NFC South would have a 3-way tie at 8-9 at top of that. And Carolina, even with a loss to Tampa on Saturday, would still be the NFC South champion. We will, get to the conversation when the playoffs begin. I still think you should seed based on record. I have no issue at all with division champ, regardless of record, nailing down a playoff spot. But if an 8-9 team is going to host, let's just say, a 13-4 potential Los Angeles Rams team in a 4-5 first round game, it's not fair. It's just not competitively fair. Win the division, get a spot. Win the division, not guaranteed a home game, is the way I would see it. Or at the very least, you could make the simple rule that if you win your division with a losing record, you don't get a home game. But anyway, we're going to potentially see that. If Atlanta loses tonight, Carolina-Tampa is a walk-off game, one way or the other on Saturday afternoon. They'll play it that way even if Atlanta were to win tonight. Even if they were to win tonight, Atlanta still would have to beat New Orleans next week to get Carolina in, even if Carolina lost. The Falcons have been playing pretty good football with Kirk Cousins at the helm. In fact, they'll look back on a game, I think it was Thanksgiving weekend against the Jets on the road, in which there were 3 dropped passes at the end of regulation that would have put him in field goal range to win the game. That is the difference between Atlanta having a chance to win the division right now and being already eliminated. Crazy weekend. I'll tell you what, man, I think it started with that Houston Chargers game on Saturday. That was a hard-hitting, physical football game. Fun to watch. Interesting for me because I gave out the under in that game, and Houston scored 2 touchdowns on their first 2 possessions, and it was 14-0 before you could even blink, and yet that game came in under the total. Another winning week and weekend for the smell test. The insane year continues. Let's hit the what do you got, if you don't mind. Thank you. I'm going to veer away for a moment from football. We've got plenty of time. We'll go through all of the games. We'll go around the NFL in a few minutes, game by game. But how about our Washington Wizards? It's really not my what do you got, but they've won 3 of their last 5 games. They beat the Grizzlies last night. The Grizzlies were a 15-16 team coming in. In that game, Alex Sarr, if you're not following the Wizards, he's the number 2 pick from 2024. Alex Sarr had a career high 6 block shots in the game. He's got that long arm thing, and he's got good timing. He had 20 points in the game, 9 rebounds, and 6 blocked shots in the game. The Wizards have quietly played some pretty good basketball. They actually destroyed the Raptors in the game before the Grizzlies. And in that particular game, we had a Kaishan George big-time game, 23 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, and a blocked shot. Some of these young players are developing. They are. I know most of you aren't paying attention. I mentioned that. That's not actually really my what do you got. My what do you got is this. Last night in Los Angeles, Kawhi Leonard scored 55 points. It wasn't just that he scored 55 points in the game. He grabbed 11 rebounds. He dished out just 2 assists, but he had 5 steals and 3 block shots. Some of you know this about me. I am just a massive Kawhi Leonard fan, and I have been going back to his days in college at San Diego State when I begged the Wizards to take him in that particular draft. Look, he is an odd dude. There is no doubt about it. And a lot of people will point to Kawhi and say he's exactly what's wrong with the NBA. Load management, won't play unless he's 100% healthy. The truth is, though, that Kawhi's actually had legitimate, serious injuries during his career. And that's cost him much of the time that he's missed, more so than load management. Load management's been a part of it, no doubt, but it's typically been a part of it with him coming off injury. I have said this for many years running. I think that the load management and the injuries will tarnish a bit his Hall of Fame career. He's a lock Hall of Famer. There's no doubt about that. But it will tarnish it because he didn't reach what I think some people thought he could reach. He's not done yet. Just to be clear, he's 34 years old, and he just scored 55 points 2 games after scoring 41. But I do think, along with really LeBron, he's the best two-way player of his era. It's very hard to find somebody who, when healthy, is as dominant defensively as they have been offensively, and it's greatness on both ends. Last night was an absolute clinic. He got 51 of the points against one of the best defensive teams in the league, the Detroit Pistons, in 3 quarters. They just had a big lead, and they started to double Kawhi in the fourth quarter, and he gave the ball up. Kawhi this year now, this particular month, he's averaging 30 points a game. On the season this year, Kawhi Leonard has made 123 of 126 free throws. He's shooting 97.6% from the free throw line. Now, it is true, the Clippers have really struggled. Their record is 10-21. They're on a bit of a winning streak. They've won 4 games in a row. And look, the NBA season is forever. And if you get into that 7-10 range and you're in that play-in round, and they're only, 2.5 games out of that. But they have been absolutely bludgeoning people over the last 4 games. I mean, their average margin of victory is 16 points per game over the last 4. And in that stretch, they've beaten the Lakers, Rockets, and Pistons, along with the Blazers. But last night, while football was going on, I was just following it on my phone because I'm a big fan and I watch it to see what he's doing most nights. And when he had 51 through 3 quarters, I knew it was a career high. He had never gone for 50 before, believe it or not. And he ended up, could have, had it been a bit of a more competitive game. They had, going into the fourth quarter, they had a 23-point lead. So he didn't play as much in the fourth quarter, and when he was in there, they doubled him. But if it had been a more competitive game, he'd have gone for 70. He was on that kind of a heater last night. Kawhi Leonard, no matter what you think of him, and he's odd, he's beloved by his teammates and his coaches. That's always been a given. They say no one works harder, coming off lots of injuries during the course of his career, but he's one of the greatest two-way players of all time. He just is. It's very hard to find the combination of Hall of Fame defense and Hall of Fame offense in one body, but Kawhi Leonard has been that throughout his career, and he is on an absolute heater right now. And, of course, what that'll do is it'll jinx it, and he'll end up getting injured and end up playing, 50 games this year, because he hasn't come close to playing a full season since he was in San Antonio. Even the year that he led Toronto to the NBA title, he didn't play the entire season. The one season in Toronto when he was brilliant during that postseason, leading them to an NBA title and his second NBA Finals MVP, he only played 60 regular season games. But during that postseason, he averaged 30.5 points per game. Lights out. All right, let's get to the NFL Saturday and Sunday in more detail. We'll do that when we come back. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com.
60-yard connection. Herbert from the pocket over the middle, up in the air and picked off the hands of Gadsden into Al-Shaair. Oh, what a massive moment that was.
I hate to kick off the Chargers-Texans highlight this way, but just listening to Rich Eisen's call, I think he's really good at a lot of things.
Oh, I had the same thought, Kevin.
Play-by-play is not his thing.
I had the same thought.
It's not his thing.
I like Rich for like you said, so many reasons, but yeah, this game made me go, I don't know.
I felt that way before listening to him, and I think I may have said something a couple years ago when he first started to do it, but in watching this, what would the reasons be? Let me see if I can put it into words. It's very marshmallowy. It's very syrupy. Yeah. It's very almost too cool for school, too casual.
Yeah.
He doesn't have the voice for it. He does so many things, I think, at a really, really, impressive level. I think he's a pretty good interviewer. I've seen some of his interviews before. He's a good host. Play-by-play, not his thing. Just not. It's not what he does best. I'll say it that way. The game that he called on Saturday afternoon was really a heavyweight matchup between two outstanding defenses, but there's no defense right now, unless it's Philly's or Seattle's, that's better than Houston's. Justin Herbert sacked 5 times in the game. He was so lucky to get out of another 4 or 5. And he does such a good job to escape pressure. And he got out of there 3 or 4 times. That looked like a double-digit sack day in terms of the pressures. It's one after another. It's Will Anderson Jr., who I think maybe right now behind Myles Garrett is perhaps the second best defensive player in the game. But don't forget Danielle Hunter. Don't forget Derek Barnett. That's the Derek Barnett from Philadelphia. He had a couple of sacks in this game. They are championship Super Bowl defense caliber, and they're good enough offensively as long as CJ Stroud doesn't throw the ball to the other team. I actually, the early touchdown passes that he threw a couple of long ones. He threw a 75-yarder on the first drive to Jaden Higgins, threw another one to Noel of 43 yards. Yeah, why is he in doing the show today? I don't know. It's the last day of the week for me. I'll get through it. I'm good. I actually feel great. Just lingering cough. Max, you kind of had something going. I think everybody's going around, whatever this thing is.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. It's torn through us, but yeah, we persevere.
This team is going to be either, they have a shot still to be a division winner. They win and Jacksonville loses, and they win the AFC South, which would be incredibly impressive if they were able to do that, which would give them a home game as a 3 seed, behind Denver and New England. And that would match them up maybe in a rematch with the Chargers, potentially Buffalo. So watch that. Now, Jacksonville finishes the season with the Titans. So I don't expect Jacksonville to lose that game. But, man, Houston as a 5 seed against the AFC North winner, Pittsburgh or Baltimore, I think they'll be favored on the road in either one of those 2 scenarios. I think they would, especially if Pittsburgh goes into that game. Especially if they go into that game without receivers other than DK Metcalf being back, although that would be huge. Houston, big win for them. Very impressive on Saturday. Let's go to Saturday night for Malik Willis and the Packers against Derrick Henry's Ravens.
Derrick Henry with a hole. Derrick Henry, touchdown. His 4th of the night. King Henry rules all in Green Bay.
I don't know what took him so long to figure it out. Just give Derrick Henry the football. Man, the Packers have been a different team without Micah Parsons, and you would say, well, that shouldn't be the case against the run, and yet it has been. The Bears ran it, the Broncos ran it, and then Derrick Henry, what a night for him. 36 carries, 216 yards, 4 touchdowns. I'm starting to wonder whether or not they care if Lamar Jackson comes back for Sunday night against the Steelers. Tyler Huntley was so efficient. First of all, it's easy to turn around and hand the ball to number 22. Secondly, Huntley gets the ball out of his hands incredibly quickly. He's actually also pretty damn mobile. I mean, he had 60 yards rushing. I'm not saying that Tyler Huntley is a better quarterback than Lamar Jackson, but Lamar Jackson playing at 40% or 50% of his powers because of the back and everything else that's been bothering him, they might be better off against the Steelers with Tyler Huntley. Malik Willis, I think, in back-to-back primetime games against the Bears and against the Ravens, is it possible he just got himself a big offseason contract somewhere? It's not crazy. I mean, the giving up on quarterbacks in their first few years is, how many times do we have to be taught this lesson? He was 18 of 21 for 288 yards in the game and then got hurt and left. He got hurt at the end of the Chicago game that they lost as well. Green Bay's got nothing to play for this coming week. Obviously, Jordan Love will be their quarterback when they take the field as a 7 seed. That is a locked-in position. But Malik Willis, I think, will get some free agent looks in the offseason with the way he just played 2 football games. That was a 3-point game, late third quarter. Let's go to Sunday. Let's start in Cleveland, where the Steelers had a chance to clinch the AFC North.
3 on the play clock. Rodgers out of the gun, looking to the end zone, and it is incomplete. Incomplete and no flag. The Browns have pulled off the upset.
So a couple of things about this game. Pittsburgh absolutely can't beat a great defensive team, which Cleveland is, without DK Metcalf, Miles Austin, and then losing Darnell Washington in the first half, their big 300-pound tight end that has been a bulldozer for them. And yet they had a shot at the end, a couple of just dimes on the last drive, but they got into that first down situation, and it came down to couple of miscommunications, and then with his old buddy Marquez Valdez-Scantling, MVS, he jumped too early. If you saw the play, MVS jumps too quickly and is coming down while that ball is rising. That's a DK Metcalf ball. Romo pointed it out very well during the game. He said, this is the kind of team you have to have a DK Metcalf to be effective, because they're going to play more man coverage than anybody in the league. And you have to have somebody who can beat man coverage, or you can throw it to in 50-50 situations and he can make you look good. What an absolute selfish act. And I understand that the potential fan, there's a lot of there. He held a press conference last week and apparently didn't say anything derogatory, but there's audio from him doing it with DK Metcalf a year earlier. This has been an irritant for Metcalf. It doesn't matter. You cannot go over and address fans the way he did. You knew his suspension was coming, and it was at the worst possible time for a team that was rolling offensively. You know, they had beaten the Ravens, Dolphins, and Lions by averaging 28 points a game and a bunch of yards. And you take DK Metcalf along with Miles Austin and then Darnell Washington out of that lineup against a good defense, actually an outstanding defense, and they really struggled. Not to mention Boswell missed a field goal in the game that hurt them badly, because they could have, in that situation, been down 4, although they went for it late. They may have punted only up only down 1 in that spot. So now it comes down to Baltimore at Pittsburgh. Sunday night, the final game of the 2025 regular season. Baltimore is a 3.5-point favorite. I think Pittsburgh will have an easier time offensively because Baltimore's defense nowhere near what Cleveland's defense is. But that is a stinging loss for them. Let me just say that Shadur Sanders in the first half looked great. And then when Harold Fannin, their really, really good rookie tight end, left the game, it was a problem. He threw 2 balls that should have been pick sixes. I mean, right in the hands and should have been pick sixes, and he got very fortunate. But it looks like he's making progress. I'm not watching them enough to know for sure, but, Romo watched all the tape and said Sanders has been making progress, and then he had an absolute lights-out first half. Cleveland had a 10-0 lead and took a 10-6 lead into the second half. Pittsburgh and Baltimore for the AFC North. I have, let's just say, some action on Pittsburgh from before the season started to win the division. So I was a Green Bay fan Saturday night and a Pittsburgh fan yesterday. I think it's going to be a problem for them on Saturday night without receivers. I really do. Although, the key will be, can they stop the run? Obviously, because you would imagine that Derrick Henry is going to get the ball no less than 28 times. I mean, what's the over-under in carries for Derrick Henry in that game? 22 and a half? What would an over-under on running back carries be, Max? I don't play those prop bets.
It's 22 and a half sounds right. Those don't come out until like the day before the game, once everything's out. So I will be keeping an eye on it. That's for damn sure.
So that's the AFC North situation. Baltimore at Pittsburgh. They played a couple of weeks ago in Pittsburgh. Really was very dynamic on the road against the Ravens. Rodgers threw for nearly 300 in that game. They weren't able to run the ball very effectively against Baltimore, but Baltimore just, Lamar threw a pick, missed receivers. Then they had that very controversial ending with Isaiah Likely catching and not getting the third step down in the end zone. There will be an opportunity for the Ravens to fulfill a lot of what people thought before the season started. The season's never over until it's over. If they get into the postseason as a 4 seed at home against a Houston, I'd give Houston the big advantage there, but home field will mean something for the AFC North winner. Let's go to Indy for the Colts and the Jags.
They do bring 5. Leonard steps up. Here it goes, letting it fly to the end zone. Alec Pierce had a shot at it, but not going to get it. The job's finished.
They brought Riley Leonard in to throw the Hail Mary at the end. Man, that was a tough one if you had the Colts plus the points in this game, because Jacksonville kicked a field goal with that guy who's just unbelievable leg, Cam Little. From 53 yards out to give him a 6-point lead with like 15 seconds left. They could have gone for it. They could have punted. They could have done anything. They kicked a field goal to get the cover. Trevor Lawrence, solid in this one, especially as a red zone runner, 2 touchdown runs in the game. Phillip Rivers completed his 3-game set with the worst of the 3 games for him. He was 17-30 for 147 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. And the Colts become the 5th team in NFL history to start 7-1 and miss the playoffs. One of those teams was the 1996 Washington Redskins, who started 7-1 and finished 8-8 and out of the playoffs. Indy right now 8-8. They finish up at Houston at the end of the season. We'll get to the rest of the NFL Sunday to include the Eagles and the Bills and the mistake I think Sean McDermott made at the end of that game. That's next.
All right, happy Monday, everybody. We start off with the Sunday Night Football thriller. The Niners beat the Chicago Bears in a barn burner that ended on the final play with Chicago unable to punch it in from the 4-yard line. 42-38 final score. The Niners will play for the 1 seed versus the Seahawks on Saturday night after the Bucs and Panthers duke it out for the NFC South title. Plus, the Washington Wizards actually won a basketball game. They defeat the Memphis Grizzlies 116-112. Alex Sarr posts a career high of 6 blocked shots. Wiz winners in 3 of their last 5. They'll re-rack tonight, take on the Phoenix Suns. That'll be over on Bloomberg 99.1 at 7 p.m. Tonight, the Caps, they take on the Florida Panthers. Puck drop set for 7 p.m. Pregame underway on 106.7 The Fan at 6:45. And right here, we got Monday Night Football on tap between the Rams and the Falcons. Kickoff set for 8:15. Coverage begins right here on the Team 980 at 7 p.m. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live every day from 10 to 1. You can catch programs like Take Command and Denton's Office throughout all of football season. Don't forget to hit the like button whenever you do decide to join us. Turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that is what's trending.
Ewers throws on 3rd and 8. It is caught and will be taken all the way by Theo Weiss Jr., 63 yards in his second NFL game. It's his first touchdown.
Miami over Tampa 20-17. That sets the stage for, along with the Carolina loss to Seattle, an NFC South game Saturday afternoon between Tampa and Carolina for the division if Atlanta loses tonight or in their finale against New Orleans. Wow, has Tampa fallen apart. Losers of 7 of their last 8 games, and their one win was barely a win over the Arizona Cardinals. You know, all of these games have been tight. Remember early in the season, they went 3-0, winning on the last play of the game in 3 straight weeks against Atlanta, the Texans, and the Jets. And then they won that classic game back in early October at Seattle, one of the games of the year, 38-35. But since, all right, this losing skid includes a 28-23 loss at home to the Patriots, a 24-20 loss at home to the Saints, a 29-28 loss at home to the Falcons, a 23-20 loss last week at Carolina, and a 20-17 loss yesterday at Miami. Ironically, the Miami final score was the one that wasn't legitimately close. The Dolphins had a 10-point lead, and Tampa scored late. Baker Mayfield, 2 more interceptions and 2 fumbles, lost one of them in the game, and that was the difference. -3 in the turnover margin. And the Dolphins, you know, they have played pretty good football down the stretch here with Mike McDaniel. 5 of their last 7. I think he's coming back. Who's the quarterback going to be? Have no earthly idea. But Tampa still, believe it or not, could end up hosting a playoff game despite losing 7 of 8, but they have to beat Carolina. They are a 3-point favorite in that game on Saturday afternoon at home against the Panthers. Can Todd Bowles, you know, resurrect that defense? Can they win that game? More likely than not for the division again. The wild card here, literally is the Atlanta Falcons. If they were to win tonight against the Rams at home, then the winner of that game on Saturday afternoon, if it's Tampa, wouldn't have it locked up quite yet, because then Atlanta would have to lose to the Saints for that to happen. Let's go to New York for the Patriots and the Jets.
End zone, they still have time.
May will climb, May will throw. He's got Henry. Henry's got the touchdown. The red zone machine strikes again.
Hunter Henry with a touchdown catch. There were 5 different receivers with touchdown catches. Drake May, 19 of 21, 256 yards, 5 touchdowns, sacked just 1 time for 1 yard, a 99.8 QBR, and a near perfect passer rating. The 99.8 QBR is the highest QBR game in that metric's history, dating back to when they started it in 2006. Now, here, of course, is the issue with the Patriots. Let me just say this up front. I'm a believer. I'm a believer in May. I'm a believer, always have been, in Vrabel. I'm a believer in everything they're doing. I think the fact that they have crushed the bad teams that they have played over and over again, when this league is designed for teams to trip up occasionally against lesser teams, they haven't done it. They have 3 losses. Take week 1 out. Week 1, there's your big head fake of 2025 in terms of week 1. The Patriots lost to the Raiders in week 1 at home. Week 1 is fraudulent every year. Don't take much from week 1. It is essentially a preseason finale where the starters play. And then you get more into what teams are going to look like as you get into the weeks that follow, but not week 1. I'm a believer in the New England Patriots. I think they can win it all. I think they, with that offense and with the way they play, opportunistic defense, I do think that they can win as a 1 seed in particular. If they can get the 1 seed, they may not be able to, but I think they can win a couple of games in Foxborough. I think they could get to the Super Bowl. I want to see what they look like against a dominant defensive team. That's what I want to see. The one on the schedule they played this year was the Browns, and they crushed the Browns. It was a tight game early, but they crushed them. They have beaten one team in their 13-3 season, one team with a winning record, just one. That team being the Buffalo Bills all the way back in early October. They have 13. They have 12 wins of their 13 against teams with losing records, or without winning records, because the Panthers, I guess they did beat the Panthers, and the Panthers right now are 8-8. So a 500 team and Buffalo are their only two, what you would call, in hindsight, quality wins. Although sometimes that's a little bit dangerous, because I'll tell you what, I thought the win at Tampa was a quality win. Tampa has absolutely gone into a tailspin, and that was part of it, but I thought it was a quality win. They finish with the Dolphins. They can get the 1 seed with a win and a Denver loss to the Chargers. And other than that, it would be Denver, because of best win percentage in common games if they both win to finish 14-3. So Jacksonville still, if New England and Denver were to lose, has a shot at the 1 seed, but it's likely going to be Denver, I think. I don't know that the Chargers have much to play for, other than you want to be the 5 seed and go to the AFC North winner, I think, in the AFC postseason. But the Patriots, to me, I'm a believer in the Patriots, even though they have not beaten many teams of note. They will face them in the postseason, that's for sure. I'd love to see a matchup between Houston and New England. I'd like to see the best defense in that conference against New England's offense to see what it would look like. I think New England would do well. I think they are lethal offensively. Let's go to Seattle, Carolina.
With a traditional fullback, running back look, and Darnold's going to throw it. Hits his open man. It's Barner cutting it for the touchdown.
So something you got to know about the day that Bryce Young had, I mentioned it earlier. He was 14 of 24 for 54 yards. He had an interception, was sacked twice against that Seattle defense, which has just been absolutely suffocating at times this year. So how about this stat? Bryce Young's 54 passing yards on 24 pass attempts. It's the fewest yards by a quarterback, passing yards, with 24-plus pass attempts since David Woodley back in 1980. Who's David Woodley? David Woodley was the starting quarterback for the Miami Dolphins in Super Bowl 17 against the Redskins when Washington won its first Super Bowl. Seattle's defense against San Francisco's offense on Saturday night for the 1 seed. That should be spectacular. Let's go to the battle for number 1 overall, Giants-Raiders.
They get it about the 5 for the Giants. Finds a gap, has some room, being chased. He's being chased by Carson. He'll take it all the way. That is a touchdown. 95-yard kickoff return touchdown.
I can't imagine there was a game this year that was watched by fewer. It was the only other game in the late window. It started early in the late window, and in the battle for the number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft, the Giants lost by winning. They beat the Raiders 34-10. That kickoff return for a touchdown was Deonte Banks's return of 95 yards. I saw this. The Giants now 2 straight years had the number 1 pick locked up entering week 17. They won last year in week 17. They won this year in week 17, and they will not end up having the number 1 pick. The Raiders will. We'll talk draft pick positioning for Washington when Ben joins the show a little bit later on. Let's save Eagles, Bills, and Niners, Bears for when we come back, because I do have some thoughts on Sean McDermott's decisions at the end of that game. We'll get to those after this. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com.
throw. Pressure throws. Incomplete. Don't see a flag. Eagles going to hold on.
All right, this game was, first of all, the weather for this game was horrendous. I mean, downpour throughout. Philadelphia's defense was just awesome. You know, Buffalo has really struggled with the better defensive teams they have faced. The Texans, who really beat them up on a Thursday night. The Browns nearly beat them last week. And the Eagles did beat them essentially with no offense or very little to no offense in the game. Buffalo better get the right matchups in the postseason, you know, and as a non-division winner, really what they're looking at now, best case is a 5 seed. That would put them in the AFC North winner. That can get them to the divisional round. And then it's a matter of whether they're going to Denver or New England. I don't know that they would thrive against Denver necessarily in that defense. They're a good football team. They're just not a complete football team. And man, Josh Allen has had some issues against pass rushes that have been overwhelming. I mean, he was sacked 5 times in the game, and look, he got away. Like I said about Justin Herbert on Saturday and Houston's pass rush, it's like it could have been 10 instead of 5, if not for his incredible escapability. And he was banged up. He injured his ankle a little bit in that game yesterday. The Eagles' defense looks like it is in proper form, late season form, especially with Jalen Carter back. He is a massive difference maker. Of course, the issue with Philadelphia is just offense. In this game, I mean, you had some of the worst offensive football in the second half. Jalen Hurts, that would be the he I'm referring to, went an entire half without completing a pass, and they still won the game. They had, I think it was 5 yards passing. The Eagles are 3-0 in games this year in which they have 5 passing yards in a half in aggregate. That's just remarkable. I don't know if you can win 3 games in a row without any offense. We'll find out. That goes back to how I started this show about, you know, we've seen an incredible resurgence of great defensive footballs, defense leading the way like it used to. Again, it didn't last year's postseason with the Eagles being a dominant defense and it leading it to a Super Bowl win. So let's go to the end of the game and I'll do it chronologically because my big issue is not necessarily with the decision to go for 2, although I think you could easily make the case that they should have kicked and gone to overtime given the state of the game. My bigger issue is that Buffalo and Sean McDermott, after Knox was called a touchdown and then it was reviewed and overturned because he was down inside the 1-yard line. There was an automatic 10-second runoff from 10 down to 8. Buffalo had 1 timeout left. They chose to take the 10-second runoff and then call the timeout. Why did Sean McDermott do that? Well, his thinking was that there's 1 play left in this football game. So if we don't score, it's over. If we do score, we're going to go for 2, and we're either going to be, up or we're going to be down. And I don't want to give Philly any time if we're up. And if they scored on the play, there would be 5 seconds left, which there was after the next play touchdown. And that left Philadelphia no time, really, had they fallen behind in the game. But that's the problem with Sean McDermott's thinking. There's two issues. Number one, he should have never taken that 10-second runoff from 18 down to 8 for 2 reasons. Number one is this. If he takes the timeout there, it's 4th down, right? It's 1 play. He's going to sneak it. But there's always a chance, not a high-level chance, but let's just say he was going to throw it from the 1, that there could be a defensive holding. There could be an illegal contact. There could be hands to the face on a play in which they don't score. What does that do? That gives you an automatic 1st down. Do you want the automatic 1st down with 5 or 4 seconds left or 14 or 15 seconds left? Obviously, more is better than less when you're losing the game. So you have to think in terms of that for starters. You also, in context, need to understand Philadelphia has not completed a forward pass in the second half of the game. Like, they're not going to get into field goal range if you take the lead or even if you decide to kick and tie it. But the second reason, other than defensive penalty that would result in an automatic first down, and in that particular situation, you've got to have more time. You can't have it come down to one play. By the way, when it comes down to one play, especially on a pass, or maybe two potential plays, teams will hold. They'll be more aggressive in that spot, knowing that after that, potential play, you've got one more snap and that's it. So you never want to leave so little time as to not be able to benefit from a defensive automatic first down penalty. Number two is this. He knew he was going for two. He was going to go for two when the Knox touchdown was called a touchdown. Well, if you're going to go for two to win the game or to take the lead in the game, what happens if you miss it? Well, then you're going to kick an onside kick. Would you rather be kicking that onside kick with 15 seconds left in the event that you get it, or with 5 seconds left in the event that you get it? Just not intelligent clock management by Sean McDermott. So that's really the big issue I had with that. You're taking away any benefit that could come from a defensive automatic first down penalty. And number two is, what if you miss the 2-point conversion, which they did? It's not over, because if you recover an onside kick, the chances aren't great. Understood. I think it's at 10% this year, somewhere around there. A little bit higher than it was last year, I guess. But if you recover it, and he put himself into a position where if they had recovered the onside kick, they would have only had a Hail Mary at their disposal, rather than recovering it and having an opportunity to throw the ball down the middle of the field, clock it, and kick a field goal to win. That was not smart. There's really, to be honest with you, there's no debate on that, because Philadelphia was impotent offensively. It wouldn't have mattered had they made the 2-point conversion and there had been 15 versus 5 seconds left. Philly was not going, more likely than not, they weren't going to get into field goal range. Now, with respect to the decision to go for two, look, part of it is that Jalen Carter had just blocked the extra point on the touchdown before. Philadelphia's, had an unbelievable season this year blocking kicks. Go back to the Rams game that they stole with multiple blocked kicks, including on the final play of the game. So there is that concern, and you've got a new kicker, basically. You got a guy that, in there that, it's Michael Badgley who was in there. Was he another guy that kicked for us? Was he in our preseason? I can't even remember. Was Badgley on our roster in the preseason?
I think at some point. It's been quite a revolving door.
So I do understand if part of the thinking was, I don't trust my kicker in this spot. He just had one blocked. It's bad weather. Jalen Carter's on the other side. Can you imagine if we missed 2 straight extra points and lost the game 13-12? With that said, the odds of them kicking an extra point successfully are much, 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 much higher than them completing and converting a 2-point conversion against that defense. And the issue is, in context in that game, the Bills had started to wear down Philly's defense a little bit over the final 2 drives of the game. Philly had just been out there so much because their offense could not stay on the field. So you had an opportunity to, I think, go into overtime with the advantage. So I would have kicked. I understand the hesitation with the kicker and the last extra point, but I think in that situation, their best odds to win the game would have been to kick and to go to overtime. But to me, that's more debatable, whereas the first part of that is not debatable. When you're in a 4th down situation, unless you're kicking, you need a touchdown. Don't whittle the clock down to like one opportunity. There are so many times where you get a defensive penalty. And then in their case, they were going to go for the 2. you have to plan on, well, what if we miss? Well, we're going to kick an onside kick. What if we were to get the onside kick? Is it better to have more time or less time? I think the answer to that's pretty obvious. Let's go to the Sunday Nighter, which was, following on a couple of games here recently, one of the best games of the season.
4 seconds left, 2nd and goal. Here is Williams. He's got to throw it to the end zone. Clock has expired. Williams keeps the play alive. He's looking. He's got to get rid of it. Retreating, he throws. Incomplete. It's over. And the Niners have won.
Caleb Williams was outstanding in this football game. He has really developed. Really helps that they have a running game. It helps that they have an incredibly user-friendly, quarterback-friendly offense. Ben Johnson's done a phenomenal job. He's got, weapons. We knew, when they drafted him last year that Chicago was set up. They have a really good overall roster, and they added, in this offseason, Colston Loveland, the tight end from Michigan, and Luther Burden from Missouri. He was the guy that I thought should have been considered to be one of the first receivers in the draft taken. He went in the 2nd round. They've got 2 outstanding running backs. They're completely different. And their problem is what the 49ers problem is. They can really move the football and they can score. Right now, nobody's doing it at the level that the 49ers are doing it. But defensively, these are bad football teams. Now in Chicago's case, you can't say bad because they turn people over. They lead the league, right? I think they lead the league in takeaways. But in overall yards, you just can move the football. And they were an injured team defensively last night. I do understand that. Takeaways this year, the Bears at 32 and the Jags at 30. Man, that makes a difference, doesn't it, when you're able to take the ball away? The Bears have a plus 22 turnover margin. And on the first play of the game, they had a pick 6. Their corner, who was out for a big portion of the season, Jalen Johnson, was, back last night. He made that play. It was borderline pass interference. He did get there early. I'm glad they didn't call it. It was a pick 6 to open up the game. The 49er offense here in the last few weeks, we talked about it at the open, in the open to the show. I mean, they've 142 points plus a game in their last 3 games. Against that Brown defense, they got stifled a little bit. I mean, the yardage was down. The points were down. They still scored 26. Now, in that game, they had a plus 2 in the turnover margin, and Cleveland offensively with Shadur was completely, incapable, really. But even against the Browns moved the football a little bit more against the 49er defense. Can the 49ers, can they win against teams that are better defensively? What if they get Philly in the postseason? I want to see that. I want to see what this looks like on Saturday night. Seattle's defense. I mean, to me, the key Saturday night is Sam Darnold not throwing up all over himself like he did last year in this spot. He's in the same spot, same exact spot again, a road game for the 1 seed and a first-round bye. Last year, it was painful to watch it when they went to Detroit. This year, same kind of thing. They're going up against a great offensive team, but not a very good defensive team. Why aren't the Niners good defensively with Robert Saleh? That's where their injuries have hurt them the most. No Nick Bosa and no Fred Warner. But they've had injuries on offense, too. They've overcome everything this year. Kyle Shanahan, what are the Coach of the Year odds right now? Kyle, if they win on Saturday night, Kyle should be Coach of the Year. What he's doing is the total aberration. Overcoming that number. Look, they've got great players, but they lost in the game last night. Trent Williams, he left the game last night. They're really, really well coached. Wow. Great organization. What a game Saturday night it's setting up to be. What's the number in that game? Is Seattle favored? I'm going to guess that it's pick'em. Seattle minus 1.5. After what we've seen from the Niners in standalone spots the last 2 weeks against the Colts and the Bears offensively, 90 points in the last 2 games. I mean, last night, 496 yards, 32 first downs. They did punt last night twice. Thomas Morstead was so excited. See how excited he was, Max, to punt for the first time since November?
He was speeding out there, dude. I've never seen a 39-year-old man run that quick.
I've never seen a punter so excited to be on the field, ever. What a matchup. Man, Seattle's favored now. Tells you right now, odds makers are leaning towards defense.
It's been the year. It's been that kind of year, man.
Yeah, I mean, the 49ers can't stop anybody. That's their issue. I mean, even last week, it was really a kickoff return that got fumbled that changed that whole game.
Yeah.
The Bears had 440 yards of offense, and they were down first and goal with a chance to win it 45-42. Wow. Great football game. We have had a season, man. It's been a crazy season with all the teams, but some of the games, you know, what comes to mind to me, 38-35 Tampa over Seattle. I think without question, the game of maybe the last 5 years in the NFL is the Seattle 38-37 overtime win over the Rams with the insane 2-point conversion. That was ridiculous. And here we are talking about Seattle's defense, and that tells you how great the Ram offense is. But remember, Seattle had 3 turnovers in that game. They were -3 in the turnover margin in that game, which is one of the reasons that the Rams put up 37 in the game. But Stafford threw for like 450 or whatever it was. But that game was insane. We had that incredible Pittsburgh-Cincinnati Thursday night game, the Jet comeback against Cincinnati. Not even good teams, but just memorable games. The Detroit-Pittsburgh game from last week, incredibly memorable regular season game. And then last night in Santa Clara, 42-38. Wow, some great football games. Another one tonight, as I mentioned, it's actually pretty big in the NFC South. The Buccaneers will be rooting for the Falcons to lose, whereas the Panthers will be rooting for the Falcons to win. Because if somehow the Panthers were to lose to the Bucs on Saturday, but the Falcons beat the Rams tonight and the Saints next week, Carolina would win a 3-way 8-9 tie in the NFC South. None of those teams are playing well in between the Bucs and the Panthers. That's for sure. Bucs are 3-point favorites tonight. Falcons only a 7-point dog at home. I almost gave them out as a smell test pick, but there was sharp money on the Rams late in the week. Although the sharp money looks like it's bringing it back the other way. Who knows? Maybe I'll add this one to my 5-2-1 week from last week. All right. When we come back, you'll hear some of what Jay Gruden said to me on my podcast on Friday about not just the Washington-Dallas game, but Washington's plan defensively in the offseason, especially as it relates to defensive coordinator. Ben Standing will join us at 12. We'll talk draft position for Washington. By the way, I haven't mentioned this, but I'm assuming most of you know. They'll finish the season Sunday in Philadelphia. That game is a Sunday 4:25 p.m. game on CBS. Philadelphia currently an 8.5-point favorite. What do the Eagles have to play for? Well, they can actually still capture the 2 seed with a win over Washington and a Chicago loss at home against the Lions. Who knows how the Lions will play that one, but remember that 2 seed, even though they play opening weekend, they have an opportunity to play 2 home games before championship Sunday. Whereas if you're the 3 seed, you win at home and the 2 seed wins, you're going to the 2 seed to play in that game. So that, Chicago and Philly likely to be the 2 and 3 seeds. Not likely, they will in some order because the San Francisco-Seattle winner will be the 1 and the NFC South winner will be the 4. So if both of those teams end up winning first-round games, Sunday's action will determine where that divisional round game would be played if they end up playing each other on divisional round weekend. Remember, they played, which is why Chicago owns the tiebreaker on Black Friday, and Chicago rushed for 281 yards in their 24-15 win over the Eagles. On Friday, Jay Gruden joined me on my podcast, as he does every Friday during football season, right through the Super Bowl. And we were talking, and I wanted to play some of this back for you because he did get into, after talking about the game on Christmas Day against the Cowboys, he did get into sort of the defensive coordinator conversation around here, talked about some of his experiences. Remember, everybody was always asking Jay to fire whoever he had and hire somebody new. But the conversation began with this long season, even though it's a sprint of a season. He said to me, it's amazing that we're here already at week 17. And I asked him about some of those long seasons, non-playoff seasons, and what it felt like. Did it feel like it had gone on too long by the time you got to week 17?
Yeah, that helps to have a good team. It goes a lot faster than when your team is struggling. You're
Right.
counting the Wednesdays down. Okay, I got 16 Wednesdays left. Oh, my God. I got to get through this.
Yeah.
But it was fun, working with the players and the coaches and all that stuff. And despite your record, sometimes you're still trying to develop players. You're still trying to come up with a game plan and trying to win games and beat the opposing coaching staff. And the competitive juices are still there. The winning's not, but it's still fun to get in there. But the days can get longer, especially when it gets colder. It's dark when you go in, and it's dark when you leave the office. It's like, oh my God, you feel like a vampire. But some seasons are tougher than others, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's easier for us, on the field yesterday. There were just players and numbers. Now, it's been this way for Washington pretty much all season long, where you've needed, a legitimate program each week to identify who's out there and who isn't. But do you remember a late season meaningless game where you discovered somebody where you're like, oh my God, I had no idea that he could play this well?
I do not remember that. We had a couple of young guys that I thought would be a lot better than they were, that played well late in the season, but nobody that really emerged as a star. That's tough. We went through so many players my last couple of years there. I was with my son last night. We were going over the roster and we played the Seahawks that game in Seattle. He goes, I'll bet you can't tell me who the left tackle was. And I couldn't think of who it was. It was TJ Cummings.
TJ Cummings. Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't have got that in a million years.
Right.
And my right guard was Tyler Catalina.
Yep.
My left tackle was the kid we picked up. He got hurt too. I can't remember his name either. So we went through so many players, but any young player that came up that really developed towards the end of the year, I really don't recall. We had guys like Rob Kelly that played well in training camp that we never would have thought in a million years would have been a starter. He was like 7th guy on the depth chart. He ended up starting and having 100 yards rushing in the first half against the Rams, for God's sake. So guys like that emerged from nowhere somehow, just the reps that they get in preseason and in the games. Sometimes guys just turn it on when the lights cut on. Some guys go the other way, and it's important for Washington to identify those players this late in the year because you never really know what happens once they get on the field in a competitive situation.
Did your son mention Ari Kwanjo? Because he started for you.
We got him from the Raven practice. Well, he was on our team. We let him go, but he was on the Raven practice squad, I believe, that week, and we picked him up, I think, on Wednesday or Thursday, and he started Sunday.
Here was the starting offensive line. T.J. Clemmings at left tackle, Ari Kwanjo at left guard, Chase Rouillet at center, Tyler Catalina at right guard, and Morgan Moses at right tackle. But do you remember who your starting wide receivers were?
That was Brian Quick, Josh Doxson, and who's the other one?
Your favorite.
Ryan Grant.
Ryan Grant. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
You had some beauties out there on defense, too.
Vernon Davis. Sprinkle and Vernon Davis.
Yeah, you had some beauties on defense, including Evander Hood, who played for you. I don't know. I mean, I'm
Ziggy.
looking.
Ziggy.
Oh, that's right. Ziggy Hood. Okay. Yes, of course. Now I remember Ziggy. Yeah. It's written down in Pro Football References, Evander Hood. I forgot it was Ziggy Hood. Yeah, I mean, that still to me was one of the most improbable wins of the last 20 years. That in the Dallas game on Monday night with Colt McCoy. But this one was so improbable because of the players that you trotted out onto the field. I mean, that offensive line was decimated.
Yeah. It was brutal. We're teaching the snap count on Friday. It's 2-minute drills, how the mechanics of the silent count. These guys have never done it together.
Yeah.
So it was a nightmare.
So what did you make of Washington's 30-23 loss to Dallas yesterday?
They played hard. I think Josh played pretty well. Just the time of possession early in the game. They took any rhythm out of Washington's offense. Dallas held the ball forever. I think Washington had one drive in the first quarter, and that was it. And it was 21-7, so they were playing catch up the whole way.
21-3.
21-3. So they played hard. I was impressed the way they played. I would have liked to see Coach Quinn, do an onside quick kick there at the end instead of kicking off. The same situation was Chicago versus Green Bay when Ben Johnson kicked the field goal, then they did the onside kick and got it and went down and scored and won the game. Went to overtime, but because I figured they wouldn't get off the field. But anyway, other than that, I was impressed the way they played. They played hard, and Josh Johnson, I was impressed with. Terry still played hard. Debo played hard. He ran hard. They played with a sense of purpose and competitiveness and a competitive spirit. They just weren't quite good enough.
Do you know how many snaps Dallas had in the game, even, counting every snap, penalties, etc.?
Felt like 90.
92.
Golly, that's a lot.
92. Washington had 44. Dallas snapped the ball 45 more times on offense.
It felt like that. It felt like Dallas won by 30, but they won by 7. Or 10, whatever it was.
It's amazing. When you have 45 fewer offensive snaps and lose by 7, that's really something else. Actually, it's almost miraculous. I started off the show by just saying, look, there were some defensive plays made in this game, but the story of the season after injuries is just how god-awful this defense is. I mean, it's been terrible all year. It was terrible last year. You were a head coach here with some really good offensive teams, offensive talent, and could never get off the field when it mattered. This team, here's another one for you. Dallas was 6 for 6 on fourth downs and 8 for 20, Jay. They had 20 third down attempts in the game. 20.
Jesus Christ, that's insanity. That's insane.
I mean, how do they fix this between now and week 1 next year?
Well, they got a lot of work to do, that's for sure. I don't know where to begin, really. I think secondary-wise, they need safety help. They need another corner. They definitely need linebacker help. They got to be able to run. And then we haven't even started on the defensive line, which is really lacking in a lot of areas as far as getting after the quarterback. You got to get to the quarterback somehow, some way with a 4-man rush. Right now, they're way below average in doing that. They had some good rushes yesterday. Newton had a couple sacks, which is good to see. They've had some good efforts by some other guys, but for the most part, they need some game wreckers, and they don't really have any. So I don't know where I'd begin. I'd probably begin with a pass rusher if I could find one. Obviously, Von Miller won't be here next year, I wouldn't think. They need an edge player. And that you got to probably look at replacing Bobby at some point. So you need a guy that can call the damn defenses and run the show. So they got a lot of work to do on defense. And we haven't even started with the game, a game changer on offense too. There may be another back, although Merritt looked pretty good. Bill Merritt looked pretty good yesterday. I don't know if he's the answer full time, but I would definitely start on the defensive side of the ball if I'm looking at the 8th pick in the draft and moving forward.
I mean, you haven't even mentioned defensive coordinator because it's not going to be Joe Witt Jr. So, you've gone through this. You had Hazlitt, you had Joe Barry, you had Minuski. There was always cries for you to swap out defensive coordinators because the defense was so bad and you were an offensive head coach. What do they have to do on that front? Does Quinn have to find somebody outside of his tree of guys, not Raheem Morris, not Jeff Ulbrich, not Al Harris? Does he have to think about it, Jim Schwartz, if he becomes available, or go, pay big for Brian Flores to leave Minnesota? What do they have to do from a defensive coordinator standpoint?
I think this is what Dan Quinn has to decide. Do I want to really have, put all my time into being a defensive coordinator and calling defenses and coming up with the game plan again? Or do I want to pass it along to somebody else? If I pass it along to somebody else, then I think I have to go outside the building. Obviously, I can't put Joe Witt back in there, so we got to go outside the building. Who is that? He's been around the NFL for a long time and called defenses for a long time, so I'm sure he has a great Rolodex of names that could be very successful in calling defenses here in Washington. So I think that's something he's going to have to decide: who's available, who I can get, who would really take this defense to where I want to go with the same type of ideas, the same type of mentality that I have if I were calling plays. So I'm sure he's got some guys in mind. It's just a matter of, does he want to do it himself, or does he want somebody else to do it? Who that might be is, I'm sure there'll be a lot of good guys out there. Every year there's going to be 7 or 8 staffs that get axed, and there's going to be 6 or 7 pretty good defensive coordinators out there available.
Do you ever look back, I'm sure we've talked about this before, to that stretch here where, you had bad defensive teams for the most part, and there were always cries, right, for a change in defensive coordinator. Do you have any regrets about, something you did do or something you didn't do?
Yeah, I tried. I interviewed some pretty good defensive coordinators.
Todd Bowles.
Todd Bowles. I had Vic Fangio. Vic Fangio chose not to come. I had Mike Vrabel. They wouldn't let him out of the contract at Houston. He wasn't a coordinator. He was like a senior assistant or something like that. So I thought I could take him out of New England or Houston when he was at Houston. Tried some other guys. I tried Gunther. They wouldn't let him out. I wanted a double-A Zimmer type defense when I was at Cincinnati. I liked what Zimmer did. So Gunther was the next one. He couldn't. Cincinnati wouldn't let him out. So I tried a lot of guys. I didn't settle, but Joe Barry was a decent football coach, obviously, and Minuski had the knowledge. He was a defense coordinator at Indianapolis, and with Minuski, I got Jim Tomsula to be the defensive line coach. That was a package deal. Tomsula would only come if Minuski was defensive coordinator, and these guys were all good coaches. We just didn't really have the firepower to really help them be successful in the schemes that they wanted to run.
Tomsula was a good coach, wasn't he?
Yeah, he's a good football coach for sure. The only thing is they come from the old school 3-4 2-gap system. I wanted to be more of a gap shooting under 3-4 defense. With Deron Payne and Jonathan Allen, I didn't want them sitting at the line of scrimmage, holding up the defensive linemen and freeing up the linebackers. I wanted them to penetrate, be more gap guys, and get up the field and create havoc with stunts and all that stuff. But we're more of the old school 2-gap, hole in there and free up the linebackers. But it's different strokes for different folks.
I'm guessing you weren't surprised that Josh Johnson looked more than competent in the game.
No, Josh is a pro. He's a true pro. He's a smart human being. He can pick up systems in a minute. He's been everywhere. He's seen every type of concept versus every coverage. He's been a backup. As a backup, he's very involved in games and studying the film and studying games. And, his accuracy is not what you want it to be, but he's very athletic and a great guy, and definitely functional as a backup still to this day.
We would, joke a little bit during the course of the season about the fan rush to crown Krosky Merritt or fit Krosky Merritt for a gold jacket, 3 games into his career. But now that we've seen him, and Rodriguez was inactive yesterday, I guess he was sick. He's had some games like, I went back, like yesterday's game was, with the exception of the 72-yard touchdown run, which was the bulk of his yardage, still had some good runs. He had really not broken a long one all season long, but the game was comparable to the Charger game where he was 14 for 111 and this one 11 for 105. So what do you think they have in Krosky Merritt, Bill?
It's hard, I don't know, because after that Charger game, I thought he was going to emerge as a true number one guy there. He's going to just get 15, 20, 25 carries a game, and that didn't happen. He kind of went the other way. It was kind of weird.
Yeah.
I don't know. He looked good yesterday, and he's had some moments of looking like he's got a really good burst and can run through tackles. And but there's something there that I just feel like he's missing. I don't know if it's pass protection, catching the ball out of the backfield, consistency in reading holes, and I don't know. The jury's still out for me on him. I don't know if he's a true number one back for next year, but he has shown flashes of being that. I think hopefully for Washington's sake, they do feel like him and Rodriguez can carry the load. They don't have to worry about a draft pick early in the rounds or sign a big-time free agent at running back. So they can use that for other positions that they desperately need. That's what they have to decide. Are we good enough at back with the guys we have, or do we have to, if the Notre Dame back is there at 8 or 7, do we take the Notre Dame back? I mean, hell. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
Those are decisions they have to make as well. Are they good enough where we can use those picks and that capital for other positions, which we desperately need, or do we need to get game-changing back to help Jaden out? So those are tough decisions. I would, if there's a superstar available in the draft, I would have to seriously think about it, because that is a very important spot as well.
Jay Gruden from late in the week last week on the day following the loss to the Cowboys on Christmas Day, talking about various defensive scenarios. Interesting. He wanted to hire Vic Fangio. He wanted to hire Todd Bowles at one point. There's a whole story around the Todd Bowles availability the year that Jay wanted Todd Bowles. There was a lot of discussion among many people in the know that, there was a real, resistance to come join this organization for Todd Bowles. He had so many options, and even though this was a team he had played for and won a Super Bowl with, there were apparently a lot of people, including people in the organization, that said, you don't want to come here, not as long as Dan Snyder, owns the team. And so he chose to go elsewhere. That was a real struggle, though, for those years. Minuski and Hazlitt and Joe Barry, the defensive coordinators probably weren't the issues as much as defensive talent was. They were old and they were slow defensively during those 2015, 2016 seasons in which they were very good offensively. And there are some parallels, because the defense you have right now, I think, is the worst I've ever seen in my lifetime of watching this franchise. But it's a talent issue. It's a coaching issue. It's an everything issue. And when you don't do anything well, it's really hard from our seat to identify the biggest culprit, because there are probably several on that list. But they will be in the market for a defensive coordinator. We'll talk to Ben about that. We'll talk to Ben about their draft position. We've got more when we return. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com.
All right. Happy Monday, everybody. We start off with the Sunday night thriller between the Bears and the Niners, and a barn burner that ended on the final play with Chicago unable to punch it in from the 4-yard line. 42-38, the final score. The Niners will play for the 1 seed versus Seattle Seahawks on Saturday night after the Bucs and the Panthers duke it out for ownership of the NFC South. Plus, the Washington Wizards, they won a basketball game last night, defeating the Memphis Grizzlies 116-112. Alex Sarr posted a career high of 6 blocked shots. The Wizards, winners of 3 of their last 5. They will re-rack tonight and take on the Phoenix Suns over on Bloomberg 99-1. Tonight, Caps, they take on the Florida Panthers. Puck drop set for 7 p.m. Logan Thompson expected to be in net. Pregame underway at 106.7 The Fan, all at 6:45. Right here, we got Monday Night Football on tap between the Rams and the Falcons. Kickoff set for 8:15. Coverage begins right here on the Team 980 at 7 p.m. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live every day from 10 to 1. You can catch programs like Take Command in Denton's office throughout all of football season. Don't forget to hit the like button whenever you do decide to join us. Turn on notifications, stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that is what's trending.
Something you may have missed from over the weekend. Ben Standing, I saw tweeted out, but I think everybody had it, and that is the fines from the Philadelphia going for two late in their game on December 20th that started the brawl. Here were the fine breakdowns. Javon Kinlaw was fined the most, $20,000 plus. Will Harris was fined $11,500. Quan Martin owed just over $11,000 as well, and Mikey Sanderstill was fined $9,700. Only one Eagle was fined, and that was their big offensive lineman that Sanderstill took on, Tyler Steen, was fined $16,870. So ended up with 4 different fines from that brawl after Philly unnecessarily went for 2 at the end of the game. You know, there's been a lot of discussion as this season has gone sideways about, you know, the benefit that they'll have schedule-wise next year. First of all, we say this all the time, schedules are impossible to sort of predict in terms of strength. You don't base it off of last year. You base it really more on over-under totals, and even those are a dangerous way to do it. You just don't know. Obviously, this year, if you had the Bears on your schedule, the Panthers on your schedule, even the Seahawks to a certain degree on your schedule, Denver or Houston or Jacksonville or New England on the schedule, you probably all the way back in May said if you were a good team, yeah, that looks like a win. But their schedule, which is predetermined for the entirety of it, except for 3 opponents out of the 17 next year, on paper doesn't look that easy. Right now, based on this year, again, very dangerous to do it. But next year is the NFC's turn to play 9 at home, 8 on the road. Remember, one of Washington's home games will be an international game. So there is that. We don't know when or where, but they're committed to another international game next year. But they'll play, obviously, at home, the division opponents, Dallas, Giants, Eagles. Also at home next year, because they play the entire NFC West, not easy, at least as it looks now, they'll play the Rams at home, the Seahawks at home. They also play the AFC South, and they'll play the Texans at home and the Colts at home. 2 of the 3 undetermined opponents next year will be home games. Probably, again, one of these home games is going to be an international game, but they'll play the NFC South team that finishes in the same spot as they do. Right now, that's Atlanta, but it could be ultimately either Tampa or New Orleans or Atlanta. They'll also play the AFC North team that is in their spot. That is now set. They'll face the Bengals at home next year. Their road games, in addition to the division games, they play at Arizona. They play at San Francisco. They also play at Jacksonville and at Tennessee. And they'll play the NFC North winner on the road that finishes in the same spot in the standings that they currently are in. That'll either be Minnesota or Detroit. So next year's schedule has a chance going into it to look pretty rough, even though they finished in 3rd. You know, will the Giants' schedule be much different? Yeah, there will be 3 games on the Giants' schedule that will be different. They will play the NFC South last place team. That might be New Orleans or Atlanta. They'll play the AFC North last place team. That'll be Cleveland. And they'll play the NFC North last place team, which will be either Detroit or Minnesota. That's the only thing that differentiates these schedules. People make a big deal about last place versus first place. In your division, 14 of the 17 games are the exact same. Some are home versus away, but there are only 3 games in terms of the opponents that end up being different out of the 17 games. Ben Standing next. We'll talk about where Washington is currently in the draft position order, but where it could rise if all went well in Week 18. That's next. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com. Benton Standings with us one last time in 2025. I am off the rest of this week. Ben may join the show Friday. I don't know. That's up to Max and probably Doc or Denton, who will be hosting. I think Denton's actually hosting. Nick Asher will be in for me tomorrow. And then I think Denton on New Year's Eve and on Friday the 2nd. Ben has been a godsend for this show over the last few years. I love Ben's writing. I love the way he thinks about the game. And he wrote a very interesting story yesterday. And it's basically a lot of key numbers from the season, key stats and key numbers from the season. And I thought we could go through some of those. Ben writes a Substack column in covering this football team. So I recommend you subscribe to that. You can link to it at Ben's Twitter page, at Ben Standing. Let me just tell you, we don't have to go through every single one of them, but this was the most interesting to me, all right? It was your second number, 267, as in Washington's current winning percentage, which according to Next Gen Stats is the 44th lowest by any team in the Super Bowl era for a season following a conference championship appearance. The 44th lowest, not the lowest, not the second lowest or third lowest, the 44th lowest. If that's true, and I don't know, it could have been a misprint, that just tells you a lot about the NFL, that success one season is not guaranteed the next, even if you're in the conference championship game.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I was discussing with somebody yesterday, during the Bears 49ers game, and they were talking about how impressive they thought the Bears were, and boy, did Washington make a mistake? They should have gotten Ben Johnson. All these things, and there's a reason to praise the Bears. And I was like, but just remember, 1 year ago, the team was Washington that everybody was praising you and everybody else, and that the Bears were like, come on, who knows? And that's why it's like the Bears look really good. We'll see what they look like next year, and it is where this league is at. Especially at with the quarterback position. If that player gets hurt, go look at the Indianapolis Colts when Peyton Manning got hurt. They went from being an annual Super Bowl contender to having the number one pick and getting Andrew Luck. It is an incredibly year-to-year league. And I think also this is, when you have so many players involved in the game, if you start having injuries, that's a lot of holes you have to fill. And, it changes the calculus a little bit. And, it's the year-to-year aspect of the NFL is absolutely nuts. And I think that's also why, with the Kansas City Chiefs not making the playoffs this year, it's good to take a step back and look what they've just accomplished as like the latest sort of dynasty in this league, to have just been running the table. This is the first year that Mahomes isn't at least in the championship game, I want to say. I know for Nick Allegretti on Washington, this is the first year he's not been at least to the NFC Championship game as well, because he started in Kansas City. So that's insane. And, same thing with Brady and all that. So, to have longevity in this league as a team is nuts. And that stat is here's a good example as to why this thing just can fall apart like that.
Well, I think, and this is where I've talked in the past about where I think if you bet the sport, you have a different perspective from those that don't. I've always felt that way. And I think the nature of this league's thin margins and it being not really year to year, but week to week. And we see it every single year. It's like 1 week you look like an absolute world beater, and the next week you lose as a 12-point favorite or a 13-point favorite outright. It's just the margins are so thin. So when you declare things after a week or even after a season, it's even money you're going to look stupid in the long run, because there aren't necessarily regressions to the mean, or there aren't necessarily predictive things in the NFL. And I say that all the while acknowledging what you just said about the Chiefs and about the Patriots that came before them, that in this era of, let's just say, the last 25 to 30 years of NFL football, it really goes back even further than that, but really once free agency was introduced in 1993, it's been much more of a wide open league, anything can happen league than it was even before free agency, when you could keep a lot of your players for long periods of time. That the idea that during this era we've had essentially two dynasties is incredible. You know, the Patriots essentially had two dynasties within a 20-year period, and then the Chiefs just went through, I wouldn't even call it a mini dynasty. I would call it a dynasty. And so there is that. And then you look at that and you say, well, what allowed them to do that in this environment that's built to prevent it? Typically, you look at the quarterback more than anything else. You know, Brady and Mahomes. Those would be the two things you would look at, but you'd also probably look at Belichick and Reed to a certain degree. But it is interesting how that number, like, I'm sure many people thought Washington's the first team that to go from conference championship game to a plummeted season the season after. No, they're not. It's happened a lot over the years. Anyway, of the numbers and the stats that you put out in this most recent column, what was the one that you thought hurt the team the most? And then was there one that hinted at something more optimistic in the future?
Yeah, well, 30 players have missed at least one game, and that's probably going to go up this week, at least based on injuries. Probably goes up this week with Tyler Biadasz. I'm going to assume I don't have an update, but assuming he'll be out, and that's not even counting other guys who might be out. Obviously 30 is including some players who were not necessarily on the original 53, but that's more than half of an NFL roster. And as we've discussed, it's not so much that the injuries by themselves were problematic. Other teams, so you look at the 49ers, they've had their share of injuries, including to their quarterback, but it's the lack of depth that really crushed it. And whereas a team like the Niners have had years and years of building up this group to as players that would fit what Kyle Shanahan's looking to do, Washington is still, in relatively infancy stages of doing that. And I think ultimately, it's not an excuse to say that injuries were obviously a huge problem this year, but that it's what the injuries exposed that to me is the part that really matters the most, and where this team needs to go, to try to fix things going forward. As for the positive,
let me stop you there. I want you to get to the optimistic part in a moment, but I think that what's interesting about that is that people have mentioned in recent weeks the Niners season and what they've been able to overcome. Like, it's an aberration, people. Like, this is what the 49ers are doing right now is a total aberration. It doesn't really happen that much. In fact, when they were severely an injured group after 2019, they went 6-10, and after 2023, they went 6-11. And a lot of things have broken their way. And remember, they also have some A players, but you talked about the years it was to develop the depth. The truth is, yes, that's supportive of a season like this. But when you lose as many frontline top contributors, in Washington's case, QB 1, wide receiver 1, guard 1, running back 1, pass rusher 1, corner 1, et cetera, even when you have the depth, it's going to have a massively negative impact on the season. It's really, you pointed out, it's not even really the number of players that have missed games. It's the players that have missed the games, because there are scenarios in which you have a total number of man games that's extraordinary, but it's to, insignificant players or less significant players. For them, it's been their most significant players.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, not only is Jaden Daniels the quarterback, the most important position, but he is the one guy that, based on what we saw last year, is like a legitimate difference maker, right? For, say, the 49ers, Brock Purdy did miss games this year. They were fortunate that Mac Jones came in, and Kyle Shanahan and Mac Jones worked obviously really well together and kept this thing going. But their best player on offense, Christian McCaffrey, is having a tremendous year. He is one of those difference makers, and Washington doesn't have that. When you take Jaden Daniels off the field, combined with Terry McLaurin missing time, they just don't have playmakers, and that's what ultimately when we all discuss what do they need to do this offseason, they need to get higher end talent. Like it's kind of like the bottom line. I know that's easier said than done, but that's what they're missing. Last year's team. I mean, again, it was all fun and they did a great job and all that. But like, I'm not saying it was smoke and mirrors, obviously, but they weren't doing it with a group that you're like, wow, this is an unbelievable core moving forward. So yeah, I mean, and again, this is where it takes time to build these pieces up, but also. I'm sure like most other people, I'm kind of over all the culture talk around here to a degrry. It's moved.
Sounds like a tell the truth Monday for Ben.
Well, you know what I mean. I mean, it's important, but it can't be every time something goes wrong, you fall back to the notion of culture. Although I do agree that the players have continued to play hard for Quinn. But to me, what culture really means is that almost no matter what happens, there's a certain mentality, a system, what have you, that you can plug and play guys in, and because the core is so strong, the system that you have this belief that you're going to get things done, that it just carries forward. I mean, the Ravens have always been the example I've used. I know it's the wheels might be coming off finally, but again, it feels like Ray Lewis was there a minute ago, but it's been a long time since Ray Lewis has gone, and yet that it has felt like it's been a continuation of that era this entire time because it was such a strong dynamic that they had there. And I think ultimately, you look at the more successful teams, I know Pittsburgh with Tomlin has not been necessarily at the Super Bowl level the last several years, but the dude never has a losing record. You can go through some other teams too, Kansas City with Andy Reid and so on. So that to me is where Washington still needs to get. And San Francisco is one of those teams that's essentially there. And, that's part of where this has to go, but it's not something that necessarily happens in 1 or 2 years. But, yeah, in the NFL, like we just said, you not only do you not have time to necessarily build this up without showing any signs of success, but also it can change on a dime if something happens. But that's where the internal, vibe has to be so strong that to a certain degree you can kind of get away with, things you can't control happening.
So what was the stat/number that you think, is reflective of optimism heading to next year?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think there was a few different stats in here about Bill, and I think if you look at like some of his, there's a lot of different numbers that you can work with him. One was rushing yards over expected, a notable stat, and he is tied for fourth among all running backs this year in that category. Only Derrick Henry, James Cook, and J.K. Dobbins average more. And we've seen obviously Bill have some really good games, including just this past one. But obviously as the team faded over the course of the middle of the season, so did his production. I don't necessarily think it was on him, but it's an example of, okay, here's a guy, the 7th round pick, came out of nowhere, but was electric pretty quickly. They recognized it. They moved on from Brian Robinson, and not solely for because of Bill, but partly. And, when you're looking at a team that's got a lot of questions this year, I do think this is an area where, they may have something that they can, really kind of lean on going forward. One other number that sort of stood out to me, and this is a very sort of off the beaten path, so to speak, is involving the kicker, Jake Moody, because to me he's been essentially an afterthought as it all is going on, because okay, cool, he's not making mistakes, but he's only got the 150-yard kick, and I think we're all kind of skeptical at this point about any kicker. But since he's been let go by the 49ers after week 1, he went to Chicago, as we recall, and then he came here. He's made 17 of 18 kicks. Like if he had been here from the beginning of the year and that's what was happening, I think everybody would be throwing a parade based on how it's gone. He's been pretty reliable. Now, don't get me wrong; they need to have a competition next year. I'm not saying they don't, but considering this was a 3rd-round pick a couple years ago, and again, we have to see from distance. He's only, of those 18 kicks, only one was 50+. But look, again, for where this has been, I think it's a somewhat of a positive. And again, if he looks the part again next year, that's a huge deal because of the kicking uncertainty that's been here. So it's not top of mind when you say what's the optimism, but it was something I hadn't really considered because, like I said, it's not been top of mind amid this stretch.
Yeah, no, that was an interesting one for me. Let me give you a couple of others and give everybody that's listening a couple of others. So you mentioned the Kroski merit numbers. I remember this, early in the season before he was lost for the season. But 19.2, that was Dorrance Armstrong's pressure rate before he left with a season-ending injury. It still currently ranks second in the entire league behind Houston's Will Anderson Jr., who I said earlier in the show, I think he's the second best defensive player in the league behind Myles Garrett. So he tore his ACL, in week 7? And he had, through those first 6 and change games, he had the second highest pressure rate in the NFL, and it stood and has stood until now. That was pretty interesting because I'll tell you what, that was, to me, I remember some of those pressure rate numbers and referencing them early in the season. But to me, the guy that, ultimately was, we talked a lot about him during the offseason because he had played so well in the postseason last year, the games against Tampa, Detroit, in particular, the games against Tampa and Detroit, not necessarily Philly. So there was an expectation that Dorrance Armstrong could be a good player for them, but he was an exceptional player for them when they lost him. I still, Ben, don't think that if he remains healthy and plays all 17, it's a good defense or even an average defense. But they did lose their best defensive player when they lost him.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, we saw early on in the season, the Green Bay game and the Atlanta game in weeks 2 and 4, that, okay, there's questions about this defense. They were getting pushed around. Okay, that said, the games were not at least getting out of hand. He gets hurt, Armstrong, in week 7. I think it was in the first quarter or the first half. They lose to Dallas 44-22, and then they proceed to lose the next 3 games by 20 or more points. Now, Dorrance Armstrong by himself is not such a difference maker that's what happened, but because they were already hanging on by a thread all over the place with that group, and then they proceeded to lose, Lattimore soon thereafter, and Amos and all that. But like that, losing him took away the one guy who was doing very well in terms of getting after the quarterback and being somebody the defense at least had to pay more attention to. And yeah, I mean, you can make a strong case. Like the one dip happened in week 2 when they had all the injuries. And then you had the various Jaden absences and the Terry in week 3, but losing Dorrance Armstrong in week 7, absolutely a significant fork in the road moment for this group where things just went completely south after he got hurt.
The other number that you put in here, and I knew that this was probably a thing, but I had not seen it quantified. And you found the number, especially when you consider how little he played this year. But Jaden Daniels had more dropped passes by his receivers than any quarterback in the league. Was that surprising to you? I knew it was a high number.
Yeah, it's not by total. It's by the
percentage.
By the percentage. Yeah, by percentage. Yeah. No, I'm with you. That was a surprising number. I mean, I know we've all lamented about Chris Moore and maybe some others, but yes, I didn't realize it was that poor. And look, certainly this was not a signature year for Jaden Daniels. Nothing close really at any point this season to what he showed last year. But for the people who were like, questioning, oh boy, does Washington have a problem here? Is he not that guy? Putting injuries aside, I did see enough flashes this year. I was like, no. It looks like the same guy. He just has no help at all in terms of his pass catchers for most of the time he played. Again, one of the craziest numbers this year is that he and Terry McLaurin, connected in week 2 and then not again till week 12. Like that's insane that's how long these guys were out. That's a huge problem. So yeah, I think the drops were an issue. And again, as we discussed, when McLaurin and Noah Brown get hurt, the backups at receiver, I think for as much as any position, that was the one I think that was such a killer because it just limited the ceiling. Even if Jaden Daniels is healthy, He just takes away. You can't, there's no deep ball opportunities relative to what they had been before. So, yeah, no, he definitely was, it was an interesting stat to see. Like you said, it kind of felt that way, but it was an interesting number to find out there. And, again, there's reasons to critique the season, but there's also things to say, hey, wait a minute, this did happen, and we can't just say, well, he had a bad year.
I've already said it dozens of times. I think anybody that tries to legitimately evaluate almost anything this year, but specifically the thing that gets evaluated the most, the quarterback, is on something that I'd like to try because the dude started and played in 3 football games healthy, period. So that you have that and, legitimately only played in 7 real games. What was the other thing? I'm looking through your list. The Bobby Wagner numbers, 5 is in the number of tackles Bobby Wagner needs to become the 3rd player in league history with at least 2,000 tackles. He really has been the best tackler of his era. There's no doubt about it. He's also a liability in coverage. And I did want to ask you, beyond the numbers, I know we've talked about Bobby Wagner before, but I think there's a chance that if he wants to play football, they re-sign him and bring him back. They just trust him so much. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm not gonna write it off again, and this is kind of where I've come down with like the running back room, is that they have so many holes to fill, as we know. Yes, they have a lot of cap space, but they have a lot of bodies to replace. And we also know they don't have a lot of draft picks right now. It's not realistic for any team to fill all their needs, all their holes in a given off season. So the question is, how do you do? what do you do to the areas that have not been fixed, so to speak? In a situation where this guy, look, for all the talk of the injuries, one of the oldest guys on the team here, Bobby Wagner, he played all but 7 snaps this entire season, and the 7 snaps were because they were getting smoked. I think it was the Dallas game that he eventually came out. Incredibly durable, incredibly smart. His tackling remains phenomenal. Again, similar to Jaden Daniels, but in a very different way. If you're putting him in situations that are just not going to be helpful, i.e., having him in coverage too often when you have no pass rush, that's going to be a problem. They have to make a decision if they did bring him back. All right, are we actually having him on the field for every snap? Does it make sense to hear whether it's Jordan McGee or somebody else to get younger at this key position, but then and have more athleticism there? But then you're taking away one of the elite brains out there, like with Phillip Rivers. The reason he was able to function at all at 44 years old, being away from the league, is because his brain is a computer. Well, Bobby Wagner is the same thing defensively. Again, there becomes a point where the physical skills are just too detrimental. The deterioration of them is too detrimental. But I don't know that we are definitively there, but they've got to make that call. Why was he exposed in pass coverage? Is there something that we can do a better job at? Does getting a better pass rush help not just him, it helps obviously the secondary as well? Or, do they need to move on? I don't think it's crazy to think that they could bring him back if he wants to keep playing.
Yeah, I agree. By the way, for those that don't know, he's going to be 36 next year. He turns 36 in June. So he's not, at Phillip Rivers, Flacco, Aaron Rodgers range quite yet, but he plays a much different position. All right, let's talk draft order. For those not following it, Washington is guaranteed no worse than number 7 in the April 2026 draft in the first round. They are currently tied for 6th with Cleveland, but Cleveland has a much easier schedule strength, and that actually helps you in this conversation. It's the reverse. If you've got an easier schedule, then the thought is you should pick higher because you were bad against an easy schedule versus bad against a tough schedule. But here's the thing, Ben, and I'm sure you've looked at it. Washington currently can't go any lower than 7. But I believe there's a chance. It's not a good chance. I will concede that. But they could go as high as 2. They currently have the easiest schedule strength of everybody in front of them except for Cleveland. So the Giants at 2, the Jets at 3, the Titans at 4, the Cardinals at 5, the Browns at 6. If all of those teams won this weekend and Washington lost, they'd be number 2, I believe, overall. I think that's right. Have you been able to confirm that, or am I off on that? I'm just looking at schedule strength. I think that they would be number 2 if those teams all won this weekend and Washington lost.
I think that is correct. I mean, obviously, extremely long odds, but yeah, I do believe that is accurate. And I think what you got to hope for here is that, when the Cardinals are playing the Rams, we'll have to see what happens tonight when the Rams play. Does this mean anything for going forward for them? I don't know that it will in terms of seeding. So, and look, we saw last year, Sean McVay decided to sit guys in the last game. Even last year, it meant going on the road because he just thought that was going to be better for his team. So if that were to happen again, and the Rams sit guys, maybe the Cardinals pull out a win, right? I mean, I don't know if I can make any claim for the Jets doing the same, even if the Bills sit their guys. But yeah, that's what you kind of have to root for, that the teams that they are playing, for whatever the reason, decide, hey, we don't need this, or we're going to sit some guys, or whatever, and you get some wins. So yeah, it's possible they can move up a little bit for sure. The Browns, for what it's worth, are playing at Cincinnati, a team that because they've had such a down year and Joe Burrow is getting back, it looks like they're one of these teams that's like kind of peaking right now. Bad timing, but nonetheless, what I assume Joe Burrow is going to play in the finale, just in part really based on how his comments have been recently about his frustrations. But if he were to sit, then maybe that opens the door for Cleveland to pull something out. We know Myles Garrett is going to go hard for the sack record, and obviously Shadur Sanders is young and inconsistent, but he's going forward as well. So it's possible Cleveland could pull off a win there, but that seems maybe a bit of a long shot.
Yeah, all of these are long shots, but I mean, the Giants are playing a Cowboys team disinterested. The Jets are playing a team in who are they playing? The Jets are playing Miami or Buffalo. The Bills.
Buffalo.
Yeah, the Bills probably have to win. The Titans and the Jags, that's tough ask. Cardinals and the Rams, tough ask. Yeah, they're all tough asks. By the way, I'm looking at this. Like, if the Giants were to beat the Cowboys, what's interesting is that Washington would actually move in front of the Giants in the draft, but not in the standings for purposes of schedule next year, because the tiebreaker for that is head-to-head first. For the draft, it's strength of schedule first. So Washington swept the Giants, which is why they can't finish in last in the division, giving them a last place schedule. But in strength of schedule as the main tiebreaker for the draft, they could move ahead of the Giants if the Giants beat the Cowboys and Washington lost to Philadelphia. Man, the Giants, they haven't figured this thing out yet, have they?
No, last year they had a late win that cost them, and same. No, is it right? Didn't that cost them in 24, right, with Jaden Daniels?
Yeah, last year too.
And that whole thing. Yeah. So no, I mean, look, it's just one of those things it's the players and the coaches don't tank. It's up to if they make decisions to sit certain guys. But again, in this case with the Giants, I don't see them sitting Jackson Dart, presumably, right? For the same arguments that were being had here about, hey, experience matters. You got to get these reps. He's probably going to play for those reasons. So yeah, I mean, if he's out there, then they've got certainly a more than a puncher's chance to be competitive, let alone actually beat Dallas. So by the way, I'm so glad I watched 0 seconds of that Giants Raiders game yesterday, other than a highlight or two. That what a miserable experience that seemed like.
0. All right, I want to finish with this because I think it's actually potentially an interesting call segment for those of you that are around and into. I think a lot of people maybe people are at work today. Who knows? Jonathan Jones, CBS Sports, highlighted Al Harris, the DB's coach in Chicago, as a potential defensive coordinator hire in the offseason. We've talked about Al Harris. Al Harris worked in Dallas as part of Dan Quinn's defensive staff. So he would be part of sort of the Dan Quinn family of coaches. And my question is, if you take Raheem Morris, who coached with Dan Quinn in Atlanta, Jeff Ulbrich, also the defensive coordinator with the Falcons, coached with Dan Quinn in multiple places, and take a guy like Al Harris. And let's just say the three of them are, Dan Quinn family. And they would be probably at the top of the list of, family hires, if you will, to replace Joe Witt Jr. as defensive coordinator. Would you all out there rather Quinn hire from outside the Quinn family? Those three would be the leading names on that list. Or would you be okay if sort of the coaching cronyism continued with a hire from somebody from a pool of people that he knows well and has coached with before? So I'll ask you that first, Ben, and then at 301-230-0980, would you prefer Quinn hire the defensive coordinator from outside the Quinn family, meaning no Al Harris, no Raheem Morris, no Jeff Ulbrich, or are you okay if he hires one of those three, assuming, by the way, Raheem Morris and Ulbrich become available? What do you say, Ben Standig?
Yeah, well, you like to put me on the spot sometimes with making predictions. I'll freely make this one. If Dan Quinn hires one of those three guys from his former staff, that will go over like a blanket church around here. Nobody will be inspired by that, because we just saw, this defense with his own handpicked guy from his staff in Dallas come in here, and the defense looked like a flop. I do think that there needs to be a serious conversation about, is this scheme, is it good enough in 2025, 26? I think there's real questions about that. We've talked about struggles against Shanahan offenses. And look, even, everybody at some point changes their approach. Joe Gibbs obviously famously here has done that, et cetera.
Quinn
I think that, to me,
Quinn has over the years.
Sure.
From Seattle through Atlanta to Dallas to here.
Sure. Yeah, no, fair, totally fair. So that has to be, I think, the question. What went so wrong this year? Was it really Joe Witt? Was it, certain players on defense? Was it the system as a whole? We talked before about Bobby Wagner. If you tell me that they stay with this version of some version of a Dan Quinn defense, then I think Wagner can stay. If they shift to something else, that to me would probably make me more likely to think Bobby Wagner didn't come back. And these are part of the, just because you imagine that somebody new is going to probably want to have just a different style of defense that a 36-year-old middle linebacker probably doesn't work in. So I think that's a real question. Now, we're saying three guys that we have versus a generic candidate who's not part of this. That's the part where you have to look into who are they going to go with. Is it going to be another untested defensive coordinator who's not done the job before, similar to Joe Witt, or are they going to try to go into somebody who's a different system but has done it before? Like hypothetically, a Jim Schwartz if the Browns clean house, somebody like that. That, or Raheem Morris too also falls into that bucket. So yeah, I think that's all that is interesting. But certainly, if they go within the house, I just don't. That's not going to be particularly inspiring. And I would hope that they take a very, very long look at that as they're making changes, because I don't think it's just personnel.
Yeah, I don't think it is either, but I also am not sure that I know for sure. I think like I think about this year, we saw a season begin with the inability to cover in man. They dealt with major issues when teams ran a bunch of motion. It led to coverage, mishaps and miscommunications and blown assignments, which turned into, explosive plays. They couldn't stop the most basic of run attacks when they were facing them with even a healthy team. They were better as a healthy team with Wise and Armstrong as their edge defenders, but it still wasn't good enough against the run, and it certainly wasn't last year. So that to me is that's coaching. Now, some of that has corrected itself. I mean, they did let, Turpin go essentially, 86 yards by an inverted cover too. And that's something you saw with Quinn. He disguised a lot more coverages, but played primarily zone. And Sanders still, I think, certainly benefited from that. But yeah, I think it's got to be, even though I don't know for sure, it's got to be part of it. It has to be part of it.
Well, and also, look, as we discussed before, beyond what any specific position, they have got to get more talent on defense, guys who are legit difference makers. And in Dallas, he, of course, had Mike Parsons. He also had DeMarcus Lawrence. Like, he had guys who were, legit Pro Bowlers, and Parsons is obviously one of the best players in the league. That's not here. So the system could be completely reasonable, but you got to have the players. I mean, of course, the criticism would be, well, even when he had those guys, Dallas got smoked in the playoffs every year. And that's,
but they did,
was more the system,
yeah.
But still, you got to get there first to fall like that. So they just have got to figure out ways. And that's why this is off topic a little bit, but in terms of the draft, if you tell me that the safety out of Ohio State, Caleb Downs is the guy, safety is not a position you typically would look to take at 7. But if he is in the Kyle Hamilton vein of a guy that you can move around and that the defense has to account for, that to me might be more appealing ultimately than just taking the defensive end. I'm not saying that's what I would do. I'm just saying that needs to be considered, because that to me is, if we're going to criticize the defense, we have to acknowledge that they don't have difference makers for that scheme to work probably the way it wants to.
Yeah, something that I went back and looked at last week, just to mention it, everybody talks about that last game in Dallas against Green Bay, and they got torched by Matt LaFleur, Jordan Love and company. But the truth is, in the 2 previous playoff, opportunities, including against San Francisco, they played well defensively. Those were defensive games. They lost one game 19-12 and the other one 23-17. It was the offense, Prescott, who turned the ball over, and they weren't very good offensively against San Francisco's defense, which is why, again, I know what happened in the Super Bowl when he was in Atlanta. I'm very familiar with that, 28-3 lead. I'm just saying, if you just assume that every postseason game or every Shanahan game in Dallas looked like the last one, you'd be wrong. There are examples where his defense actually performed well and was the reason they were there and in the game, twice against the 49ers, in fact, and Kyle Shanahan. All right. Thanks for this. Appreciate it. Happy New Year to you, and thanks for the year, as always.
Thank you for giving me the platform. As always a fun chat, and I look forward to hearing your smell test picks for this week. Got a fun week coming up.
Yep, long week for sure. Lots of football this week. Thanks.
Yeah.
Ben Standing, everybody. All right, the question, if you want to weigh in, 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Would you prefer Dan Quinn hire the next defensive coordinator out of the Dan Quinn family? I think this is an easy answer for most. I'll give you my answer when we come back. We have just 2.5 days left with Window Nation's end of year sale. That means your chance to cash in on 50% off on all windows and all window styles. And if you choose to finance the purchase, get 0% interest for 5 years. Exists until the end of day December 31st. If you've been thinking about new windows, do it now, man. Take advantage of this offer. Nobody's got a better offer than Window Nation. I promise you're not going to work with a company that cares more about its customers than Window Nation, hence the 45,000 five-star reviews that they have and the #1 rating per Forbes magazine among window installation companies across America. It all starts with a free in-home estimate. You mentioned my name. They'll schedule it for you when it's convenient for you. They'll leave you with that quote, and they won't bother you. They're not going to put pressure on you. They'll tell you to shop it to see if you can beat that offer. I don't think you'll be able to. Window Nation's installation crews finish the job in a day or less. That's part of the offer. And you get your windows with a lifetime warranty. If you've been thinking about buying new windows to lower your heating bills and air conditioning bills and also make your home look nicer, all I ask is give Window Nation a chance to come out and give you a free in-home estimate. Call them at 866-90-NATION or head to windownation.com. So in the Jonathan Jones story, CBS Sports, he writes, Al Harris, Chicago's defensive backs coach, defensive passing game coordinator, has overseen a unit responsible for a league-leading 21, now 22 after last night, interceptions. A coach the past 13 years, Harris was previously with the Cowboys. In his final 4 years in Dallas, the Cowboys had the most interceptions in the league with 72 between 2021 and 2024. He had Trayvon Diggs and Deron Bland, his first team All-Pros. Today, the Cowboys have the second fewest interceptions in the league this season. The ball is worth millions, and no one has the turnover pelts on the wall like Al Harris. Al Harris coached with Dan Quinn when Dan Quinn was the defensive coordinator. Quinn decided to bring Joe Witt Jr. with him rather than to bring Al Harris with him. And Al Harris would be an example of sort of an inside the family hire, inside the Quinn family hire. As would Raheem Morris, who coached with him in Atlanta, or Jeff Ulbrich, who is the Falcons defensive coordinator, who coached with him in Atlanta. That assumes that Raheem Morris gets boomed at the end of the year, and there's no guarantee of that. The simple question is, do you want the hire to come from outside the Quinn family or inside the Quinn family? The three examples would be Al Harris from Chicago, Jeff Ulbrich from Atlanta, or Raheem Morris from Atlanta if Raheem Morris is let go. Look, I will, Kevin and Arlington and I texted back and forth over the weekend. This is one of those things where I just, trust me on this. We think we know, but we don't know anything. Those that declare things about, position coaches and even coordinators, honestly, they don't know 99 times out of 100. People know inside the game who's good, who isn't, who's the right fit, who isn't. I think I have a preference for him to go outside, and hire somebody that I know is good, like Jim Schwartz as an example, but I don't know. And nor do you really know, even though there's going to be some passion and emotion tied to this. And as far as hiring people, cronyism, if you've been in the league for more than 5, 6, 7 years, it's the way most coaches go when they have people that they've been working with for a long period of time that they're comfortable with. It's the way most coaches go, successful and unsuccessful, when you've been in the league for a long period of time. So I don't have a strong feeling one way or the other, because I feel like I'm out of my depth here when it comes to somebody like Al Harris. He might be the next great thing as a defensive coordinator, even though Quinn knows him well. Let's go to Joe in Springfield. Joe, go ahead.
Happy holidays, Kevin. How you doing?
You too, Joe.
Hey, real quick, I was up in New York with family, and there was 35 inches of snow. I mean, we had to shovel a lot of it. Now I'm in New Jersey. There's some snow on the ground, but pretty nice weather up here it's starting to melt with the 50s. But just anyway.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go outside on this. And for a guy like Jim Schwartz, that's the person I would say I would want to hire as defensive coordinator here with Washington. I mean, I'm not dismissing the other three you mentioned inside Dan Quinn's field, but, you know, if Schwartz is available, and it's maybe the Browns do clean house after this season, if they're just going to have Sanders be the future moving forward, why not have Schwartz here? I mean, Schwartz has had success in some places he's been as defensive coordinator. Why not? So we'll see what happens. And Happy New Year to you, Kevin. Hope to talk to you again in 2026. Too, thanks for everything you do for us.
Yep. Yeah. Thanks for the call. Speaking of Kevin in Arlington, he's on hold. Kev, go ahead.
Hey, Kevin. Thank you for taking my call. Well, I'm afraid if Quinn doesn't go out of the family, he's going to lose the family. I mean, he's on notice. And just give me a couple minutes on this.
Well, you only have sorry, we're at the end here. And I got to the end quickly. So you got a minute.
Okay. Look, Joe Gibbs didn't know Richie Pettibone. Never worked with him before. Joe Gibbs didn't know Greg Williams. Never worked with him before. And speaking of Greg, you'd have to say he was the last great or very good D coordinator we've had, and that was 20 years ago.
Yeah, agreed.
When the animal trainer was in charge.
Yeah.
Okay. The last time I was confident in our defense in consecutive years was 04 and 05.
Yeah.
So it's horrible, Kevin. And then, you know, I'm sorry, Quinn hasn't demonstrated with his defenses that they're very good at stopping West Coast offenses, Shanny offenses. You made that point several times this year. That hasn't changed, even if they had competitive games in the playoffs with San Francisco or whatever. It's still a problem. I want our Spags. I want our Fangio, ideally. A head coach who's no longer a head coach, but is a hell of a D coordinator, has been successful wherever he's gone. I think we need to open up the checkbook, open up our minds, because for me, Quinn's superpower is no longer defensive coaching. I mean, if it were, why would he have hired Witt? Witt was an abomination. The defense was an abomination for 2 years. Quinn's superpower is team building, culture building. So,
Kev, I got to run, man. I'm up against it. My fault. And everybody on hold, my fault. Look, if you held a gun to my head, I'd say I'd prefer somebody from the outside. But I'm going to tell you, we really don't know. Like, if Al Harris is the next big thing, that's something that inside the game they know that we don't know as much. But anyway, Happy New Year, everybody. Thanks for the year. Be back a week from today.